Enugu was always alive. From morning till night, the streets were full of activity. The smell of roasted corn, suya and akara mixed with the fumes from okadas, motorcycles, as they weaved through traffic. Hawkers shouted to sell their goods, and okada riders honked loudly, zigzagging through cars like they owned the road. Right in the middle of all this chaos was Amaka's hair palace, a small salon squeezed between a buka famous for its nkwobi and an electronics shop blasting high-life music. The salon didn't look like much from the outside. The walls were peeling, the signboard hung crookedly, but despite its shabby appearance, women came from all over the city to visit Amaka's salon. Inside the salon, the air was hot and noisy. Women filled the space, sitting on mismatched chairs and stools, or leaning against the walls while waiting for their turn. The place buzzed with laughter, gossip, and the sound of a hot comb sizzling against hair. "Amaka, I beg, let me enter the chair," Neka said. "Calm down, Neka," Amaka replied, her hands moving quickly as she braided another customer's hair. "I'm not done with Auntie Blessing." Amaka's skill with hair was like magic. Her hands moved so fast that it was hard to follow, creating perfect braids and twists. Customers always left her shop looking like a new person. She was just 28 years old, but Amaka had become one of the most talked about hairdressers in Enugu. One hot morning, a loud argument broke out just outside Amaka's salon. Nkechi and Chioma, two regular customers, were yelling at each other. "Nkechi, you think I didn't see you? You want to jump the line?" Chioma shouted, pointing a finger at Nkechi. "Me? Jump line? You are mad!" Nkechi fired back. "You this a shower, that's why you always rush," Chioma hissed. Everyone around gasped. Chioma's words hit like a slap, and Nkechi's face turned red with anger. She took a step forward and shouted, "Who are you calling a shawo? Say it again and I'll show you, Shege." "I'll say it again, a shawo. That is what you are," Chioma yelled. Without warning, Nkechi slapped Chioma. The sound echoed across the street, and everything went silent for a moment before chaos erupted. "Fight! Fight!" someone shouted as the two women grabbed each other, pulling hair and screaming. People had gathered around as always, some watching and having fun, while a few others tried to intervene. Hearing the commotion, Amaka sighed, put down her comb, and stepped outside. She wiped her hands on a towel as she walked up to the two women. "You two will not stop this nonsense," she said calmly but firmly. The two women froze, their hands dropping like scolded children. The crowd around them grew quiet. "See, you guys should not disgrace me here," Amaka continued. "If you can't wait for your turn, go somewhere else. I don't have time for this nonsense." Amaka turned to the crowd. "If you don't have any business here, I beg get away from here. You are blocking my shop." The crowd laughed nervously and began to scatter. Amaka shook her head and went back inside. Her salon was the busiest in the area now, but it hadn't always been like this. Memories of her struggles were still fresh in her mind. 2 years ago, Amaka's hair palace was always empty. For days, not a single customer would come in. The chairs stayed empty, and the air felt heavy with hopelessness. Her landlord visited often, reminding her of the rent she owed. "Amaka, how will you pay rent if nobody comes to your shop?" he asked, his face hard and impatient. "I will pay you," Amaka replied, forcing a smile. But deep down, she was scared. She didn't know how much longer she could keep the salon open. Her best friend Chinwe visited often, bringing her food and encouragement. "Amaka, maybe hairdressing is not your calling," Chinwe said one evening while they ate rice and stew. "It is my calling," Amaka replied, her voice strong even though she felt like crying. "I just need one big break, and everything will change for me." She had no idea her big break was just around the corner. One late afternoon, after another day with no customers, Amaka closed her shop early. Her heart felt heavy as she walked aimlessly through the streets, not caring where she was going. Soon it was evening. Before she realized it, she was in a part of town she didn't recognize. The air felt strange, cooler and heavier. The path was lined with tall trees that formed an arch overhead, blocking out the evening sunlight. At the end of the path, she saw a small hut surrounded by flickering candles. A soft sound of chanting came from inside. Amaka wanted to turn back, but something pulled her forward. As she drew closer to the hut, she saw that an old woman sat outside the hut, her grey hair wild and her eyes sharp. "Are you searching for help?" the woman said, her voice low and rough. Amaka nodded, too stunned to speak. The woman disappeared into the hut and returned with a small bottle of thick, dark oil. "Rub this oil on your hands before you work," she said. "Your fortune will change, but remember, nothing in this life is free." Amaka swallowed hard. "What's the price?" she asked, her voice shaking. The woman smiled faintly. "You will find out when the time comes." She thought for a moment and concluded that it couldn't possibly be a big deal. Worst case scenario, she'll just stop using it, if it was that bad. The next morning, Amaka hesitated as she held the bottle of oil. Could it really work? She decided to try it. She rubbed a few drops on her hands and began working on her first customer's hair. Her hands moved faster and more smoothly than ever before. Each braid she created was flawless, and her customer couldn't stop staring at her reflection. "Amaka, this hair is pure magic," the customer exclaimed as she looked at herself in the mirror. Word spread quickly. Within days, women were lining up outside her salon, desperate to have their hair done by Amaka's magic hands. Her income tripled. Her landlord stopped harassing her for rent. Amaka knew this was her big break. Her dream had just come true, but the old woman's warning echoed in her mind every now and then. 3 months later, Amaka returned to the hut as the woman had instructed. She brought gifts of yams and palm oil to thank her. The old woman shook her head. "I don't need all this," she said. "Just bring me the hair of a pregnant woman, every 3 months." Amaka was shocked and stood for a moment before replying. "Hair of a pregnant woman?" she asked, her voice shaky. The old woman nodded. "Yes, just a little hair, you know. Not much. Bring it to me and things will always go well." Amaka thought about it. It didn't seem like a big deal. After all, it was just hair. She agreed and left the hut. At first, everything went smoothly. Amaka collected hair from her pregnant customers without raising suspicion. The old woman always smiled when Amaka brought the hair to her, and the salon continued to thrive. Amaka's customers were happy, her pocket was full, and she finally felt like her struggles were behind her. Then strange things began to happen. The trouble began quietly. Ada, one of Amaka's pregnant customers, came back to the salon 2 months after her last appointment. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "Amaka, I don't know what happened," Ada said, sitting down heavily in one of the chairs. "I lost my baby." Amaka froze, her comb stopping mid-air. "Anne, what do you mean?" "The doctor said I had a miscarriage, but I don't understand. Everything was fine before," Ada explained, tears streaming down her face. Amaka's chest tightened, but she forced a comforting smile. "God will comfort you, Ada. These things happen sometimes, but don't worry. God will give you another child soon." But deep inside, Amaka couldn't shake the unease that crept into her heart. She tried to convince herself it was a coincidence. After all, miscarriages happened. It wasn't her fault, or so she hoped. 2 months later, another pregnant customer, Grace, returned to Amaka's salon with tears in her eyes. Her usually cheerful face was etched with pain. "Amaka," she began, her voice trembling, "my baby is gone." Amaka's heart sank. She stared at Grace, unable to form words. I don't understand, she finally managed to say. You were fine the last time. Grace shook her head, wiping her tears. I don't know what happened. Everything was fine, and then 3 days ago, I just started bleeding. When I was rushed to the hospital, the doctor did a scan and said it was a miscarriage. Just like that, sudden, no nothing. Amaka's hands trembled as she finished Grace's hair. 2 pregnant customers, 2 miscarriages. Was it just a coincidence? Amaka tried to push the thoughts aside, but her mind wouldn't rest. When a 3rd pregnant customer shared the same heartbreaking story, Amaka knew something wasn't right. Each woman had one thing in common. They had visited her salon during their pregnancies, and she had collected their hair. Unable to bear the guilt eating at her, Amaka decided to return to the hut. Her steps were slow and heavy as she walked through the eerie path leading to the old woman's home. The trees loomed over her, their branches forming strange shadows under the moonlight. The old woman was outside grinding herbs in her wooden bowl. She noticed as Amaka approached, her expression calm, as if she had been expecting her. "Mama, what is going on?" Amaka's voice shook as she spoke. "Why are all these women losing their babies?" The old woman didn't look up. She kept grinding the herbs, her movements slow and deliberate. "You are enjoying the success which the spirits gave you, Abi. Now they are collecting their payment." "Payment?" Amaka's heart pounded. "You didn't tell me they were going to take people's lives, and of all people, unborn children." The old woman finally raised her head, her sharp eyes piercing through Amaka. "You didn't ask," she replied simply. "You wanted success and you got it. This is the price. I told you success comes with a price." Amaka staggered back, her legs weak. "No, I can't continue like this," she cried. "This is wickedness. I'm no longer interested." The old woman shrugged. "If you stop, your business will cripple. Your hands will become slow. Nobody will come to your shop again. Choose wisely." "I don't care. I'm done," she shouted. Amaka left the hut in tears, her mind spinning. She felt trapped, unsure of what to do next. Amaka made a decision. She would stop. She couldn't keep collecting hair from pregnant women, not when it meant the loss of innocent lives. She vowed to end her agreement with the old woman, no matter the cost, but the consequences came swiftly. Within weeks, Amaka's hands felt clumsy, her movements slow and unsteady. The magic that had once flowed through her fingers was gone. Customers began to complain. "Amaka, what is happening to you?" one woman asked, frowning as she looked at her reflection in the mirror. "This braid is not fine at all." Another customer walked out halfway through her appointment, muttering about wasting her time. The once busy salon grew quiet. The line outside disappeared, and the chairs sat empty for days. Amaka felt the weight of her decision, but she refused to go back to the old woman. As the weeks turned into months, Amaka's savings dwindled. The rent was due and her landlord's patience was running thin. "Amaka, you are really falling my hand," he said one evening, his voice sharp. "If you don't pay, I will lock this shop." Amaka nodded, too defeated to argue. That night she sat in her empty salon, staring at the chairs that once overflowed with customers. She thought about her struggles, her rise to fame, and the price she had paid for success. Desperation clawed at her heart. She felt like she had no choice but to return to the old woman. Gathering the little hair she had managed to collect from her remaining customers, she made her way back to the hut. The old woman was waiting, her sly smile spreading across her face as Amaka dropped the hair at her feet. "You are back," the woman said. "I told you you have no choice." Amaka's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't think I can survive without my work. I need your help. The old woman handed her a new bottle of oil. Use this, but the price has slightly increased. Amaka frowned, her stomach tightening. What do you mean? The spirits are not accepting only hair again. They want something close to you. Amaka felt a chill run down her spine. Close to me? What are you talking about? The woman didn't answer. She simply waved Amaka off, her smile never fading. Amaka returned to her salon and used the oil. Just as before, her hands regained their speed and precision. Customers began to flock back, and the salon was once again alive with laughter and chatter. Amaka's name was on everyone's lips, and she felt relief again. But one day, Chinwe, her best friend, walked into the salon, glowing with excitement. Her belly was round with pregnancy, and her laughter filled the room. Amaka, I want you to style my hair for my baby shower. It's a boy. My mother-in-law has been asking for a boy. My husband is the only son, you know. I'm really happy, Chinwe said, sitting down with a smile. Amaka froze. Her hands trembled as she picked up her comb. Each strand of hair she braided felt like a weight on her soul. She wanted to stop, to tell Chinwe the truth, but fear held her back. How will she really talk to her about this? What if she doesn't understand it as it is? 2 weeks later, Chinwe called Amaka in tears. Amaka, she cried, her voice breaking. I don't know what is happening to me. I've been crying the whole day. My baby is no more kicking. Amaka felt like the ground had been ripped from under her. Her best friend, her sister in all but blood, had become a victim of the price she had paid. The guilt was too much for Amaka to bear. She stopped using the oil, stopped taking hair, and watched as her business crumbled around her. The salon that had once been the pride of Enugu was now empty, the chairs covered in dust. One morning, Amaka locked the doors of her salon for the last time. She disappeared from Enugu, leaving behind whispers and rumors. Some said she went back to her village, unable to face the shame. Others believed the spirits finally took her, claiming the ultimate price for her success. If you enjoyed our story, please subscribe and share with your friends for more amazing stories to come.